BB851, turn right, heading 180. 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
Anyway, a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and chat. It's actually been 5 months now since we first spoke when it was sunny in San Bernardino. And a lot has occurred since there in the 5 months. I thought we'd jump into, of course, though, the main focus being the big recent piece with crowdfunding, the campaign for the airline. It's obviously a unique avenue, and that's something that was pitched to me when we had the interview. So could you tell me a little bit more about how crowdfunding concerns the carrier and what it means for Northern Pacific long term?
So really, we've always been looking for a mechanism so that we could have as much ownership and buy-in from our local community as possible. And with traditional equity investments, due to U.S. SEC rules, you pretty much have to be a rich person with a really, really high net worth and high annual incomes that excludes just the average people. So with the crowdfunding mechanism, we're able to get people to have stock ownership in the company with as little as $100. That's really our goal, is that we want to be Alaska's hometown airline. We want everyone to be able to share in our success. And that's the mechanism to do it, is to allow unaccredited investors to invest with as little as $100.
Perfect. And I guess you briefly did touch on the people aspect of it. So on a personal level, what would be some of the benefits to someone that may be looking to invest in Northern Pacific? Do they going to get something from it, kind of thing?
Well, obviously, that depends on the future. Any investment has risk, and it could go to zero. But the goal is that at some point, either Northern Pacific might be acquired, or there might be an IPO situation. And in one of those scenarios, then anybody that has stocks would see a gain on their return.
Of course. And as I mentioned, when this interview was pitched to me, it was mentioned that it's not something that is the most common method when you see a new airline launch. So naturally, people may have their doubts about the approach. And what would you say to people that maybe have their doubts about a crowdfunding scheme over, say, something else?
Well, but that's I think where the confusion lies, is we're not doing it over something else. We actually have a traditional equity raise going on concurrently, that we're talking to more traditional investors, high net worth individuals and family offices and those kinds of places. So it's not one instead of the other. It's solely a mechanism so that we can get access to just average people that want to believe in our vision and believe and want to share in our success.
So I guess with Northern Pacific, it's very much you're focusing on that community, especially in Alaska, like you've mentioned many times. It's and maybe you don't see that elsewhere. And I guess for you guys, that focus is really on the community and building it as the community-based airline. You hear a lot about the pride in the carrier that is flying in that area, and I guess that's the approach you guys are headed for as well.
Absolutely. I jokingly, even though they're good partners of us, there's that other airline that has the name of our state on the side, but they really are Seattle airline, whereas Northern Pacific truly is Alaska's airline.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I think it is nice to have pride in an airline where you're from and be proud of it as well. Naturally, there's one thing having an airline, but to be able to get behind what they're really all about, I think is very important, and connecting and resonating with them will lead you to a success as well.
We believe so. I mean, taking care of our community and creating more jobs, bringing more tax revenue to the state, bringing more tourist dollars to the state is all got to be, we believe, is a positive thing.
Of course, and tourism's a big thing. I remember when we talked 5 months ago, and all throughout learning about it is bringing people to Alaska, whether it's from, say, the America, and then you're coming through to Asia. It's that stop-off point and having that hub to explore what Alaska truly can offer people.
Exactly. Yeah. My hat's off to my good friends over at Iceland Air. They've been so successful over decades doing that with this tiny little country. So it really seems like this should be a thing that people really enjoy.
Of course. We're inching closer and closer now to the launch, so I've got a few questions. So did a couple of people in the community. We spoke, as mentioned earlier, in January, and I've been wondering since then, has anything developed route network-wise? Do you have a firm idea of destinations, say, over the space of the following year?
So we're still in talks with the Incheon Airport over slots. We made a little bit of progress in the slot conference that happened last week. We look pretty solid for Narita. And then depending on how Incheon goes, we might be looking at, Osaka maybe earlier than we would have. we're still looking. We're definitely going to be in the Ontario airport because we already have our maintenance base set up there. It's looking pretty strong. Like we're going to end up in Oakland to serve the San Francisco Bay Area, and then having great talks with Harry Reid Airport there in Las Vegas.
Perfect. And you'd say that's probably still on for some time later this year?
Still looking for November 15th. As a matter of fact, and you're getting to hear this first because I just got the email an hour ago. We just got our Open Skies Authority from the US DOT. Mm-hmm. So that was one of those big milestones that we've been waiting to happen.
Perfect. So November 15th. That is 11 days before my birthday. So a lovely month.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned the 757s a lot, and I think personally, as an aviation enthusiast, and even for you probably, when you hear Northern Pacific, you automatically think 757s. You mentioned to me you'd look towards the late tails for the 20s to be able to having them in your operations. They're quite older aircraft, pardon me, of course, and a question I got from my community was related to the upkeeping of these aircraft, the maintenance that may be incurred. How do you plan to work around that in the coming years, obviously, as Northern Pacific develops and you get more of these aircraft on?
So we've already, we're close to signing a final agreement with Delta Tech Ops. So they are going to be our maintenance support, our parts pooling, maintenance planning, scheduling, and all that. And so they are experts at operating the 757. So we really think that with the support of Delta Tech Ops that we will be able to handle the maintenance situation, albeit on older airplanes.
Perfect. And regarding a launch with those aircraft, do you still have an idea of the number you'd be looking for a launch? I remember we briefly discussed that earlier. You were looking at sort of the 6 to 10 mark from memory, around about that mark. So has that sort of changed? Are you looking maybe smaller or to advance a bit further in the future?
Well, the obviously the geopolitics of the world has gotten more complex since last we talked. So now, looks like we're going to absolutely need to circumnavigate Russian airspace. We're going to need a partner to do that. We're talking to a couple different ones. So we'll be using their aircraft most likely for the Asian side of it. And we're shooting for 4 of our own to get launched to serve the domestic side.
Perfect. And I think I had a question regarding the Russian airspace, so I just thought we'd move straight on to that. How is that fared with regards to Northern Pacific? I'm sure that's presented a couple of weird moments for you guys. Would you say you've had challenges, maybe potential opportunities from all that?
I wish there was an opportunity angle. I'm still looking for that. Obviously the whole COVID situation did create an opportunity for us. But as far as Russian airspace, no, it's just been kind of a speed bump for us because having to circumnavigate requires us to get ETOPS, and ETOPS is an 18-month at best, probably, more like 2-year situation to get that authority. So that just necessitated a partner where we're going to have a partner to do that part of the operation for us while we work towards getting our ETOPS authority for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's something you completely changed, honestly, so kudos to you. You changed my perspective on the pandemic for some airlines when we spoke. I don't know if you remember the question. It was regards to how did you guys fare in the pandemic? And what you came back to me and said was it was an opportunity. And I had not necessarily considered that in some instances. And now when I'm looking at different angles, I will always think about what you said, is that there were opportunities there. And I guess you're one of the companies that have pounced on that opportunity, and well done for that, because like we've seen, it's taken quite a hit for other people, but it's great to see that at the very least we're seeing something positive come out of it.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's one thing that kind of sets us apart as entrepreneurs. Instead of looking at the worst case, like, well, how can we spin this crummy, terrible situation into something that can create opportunity? And I think we've done a fairly good job.
Of course. Back to the 757s. Obviously, they won't be a part of the fleet, sadly, forever. Although I'm sure we could both wish that they would fly on for decades to come. We briefly talked about a couple of aircraft all the way back in January that you may be exploring. Has anything developed with that? I know you mentioned something along the lines of the A321XLR. Are you guys looking at potentially welcoming in a type of aircraft, say in 3 years, 4 years? Is there a time frame, or have discussions sort of developed regarding that?
So, yeah, I have talks with Boeing and Airbus regularly. We're running numbers right now if we can make the 737 MAX 7 work. The 8s, 9s, and 10s don't have the range. It does not look like for us to be able to do some of our longer stage lengths, the Orlandos and the Incheons. But the MAX 7 might actually look like it could do it. So we're looking at that airplane, and then still, see if we can make a 321 LR work. But obviously, I mean, the XLR will work, but it's kind of a ways down the road.
Totally. And I guess even speaking on the 737 MAX 7 and the 737, MAX family, obviously there's lots of discussions around the NMA with Boeing and all of that, and will they progress with that? Have you found that of any interest to yourselves, or is it kind of a thing where you're looking at an alternative because maybe there's not been movement on that front?
Yeah, we're not seeing that. We have so many irons in the fire and so many balls in the air. Insert your busy metaphor there. So we're just looking at, what gets us across the finish line to get started right now, and then, what needs to be the next thing in the pipeline.
Of course, I sort of plan from get it up and running, and then plan from there and see how everything fares. Because, it can change in a night. Quite literally, you can have everything laid out, and all of a sudden you wake up the next morning, you find something out, and it throws everything out the window, I'm sure. And I'm sure you probably experienced that as well in recent months with the Russian airspace. You go to sleep thinking, oh, it's all fine, and then wake up, it's like, okay, time to make some calls. Just the last couple of questions, because I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're very, very busy. Let's just see. So I've been talking a lot about aircraft routes and just aircraft in general, but obviously I know that there's a lot of development going on at what will be your home airport. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that $6 million upgrade that you guys will be doing.
Yeah, we're well into that now. Construction's underway. They're working on all our new ticket counters and office space and maintenance planning space. But the showpiece of it all is going to be the passenger lounge and then the IMAX theater, and they're making great progress on that as well. We've also just struck a deal with a local coffee brewer, Steam Dot Coffee here in Alaska. They will be providing really nice upscale cappuccino, espresso, all that good coffee stuff. That will be theirs, and they're branded, and they'll have a place there in our lounge. So yeah, we're making great progress on it, and still looking towards the end of August to have that completed.
So would you say that just as much as the experience is in the air, you guys are also looking for an experience in the airport? Because like I said, I don't see many with an IMAX theater in their airport, or really putting an emphasis on maybe cool, nifty things that someone else may not have thought of.
Absolutely. We want to make their Alaska experience, whether it's short or whether it's long, as pleasant and fun and memorable as possible. And again, the whole point of the theater is to entice those folks that are just making that 90-minute connection. Here's all the things you missed by not staying in Alaska. And we'll show them all the really awesome activities and sights and sounds and tastes that are only here in Alaska.
And just enough so they don't miss their flight as well, because I'm sure there's plenty. And just to sort of wrap up here, I had a couple of questions that were all centered around alliances and whether you guys would look to potentially enter into that sector from the community. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that at the moment.
We've talked to the Value Alliance there in Asia. That looks like it makes a lot of sense for us, but we really haven't made any firm plans whether or not we're going to join that or not. And then, as far as the big three alliances, it's too early for that. There are some preliminary talks of what might make sense, but we really, we are going for such a low market share that we think we can feed ourselves. And when we have the ability for the stopover, alliance might make sense down the road, but it's not something that's super important to us out of the gate.
Totally. And I have two last questions. One that's just come from the airport experiences, and I guess even more so now, focusing on that experience inside the airport has become even more important, because I'm sure you've seen, if you've been monitoring the news, the absolute nightmare that's been going on with people's bags and just processing times. And I think making sure as best as you can naturally that you get that down pat and working is, for the passenger experience, like you mentioned, is almost critical, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and I think that's one thing that will make it a little bit easier for us by not having multiple alliances and connecting with a bunch of other carriers. Pretty much just we're connecting to ourselves. It should make the whole baggage transfer situation a lot more simpler and a lot more foolproof and seamless for us.
Totally. And like I left on the last interview we did, a bit of a fun question from my girlfriend who wanted to ask you this. She wanted to say, when flying on board an aircraft, what is your go-to snack that you'll buy, say, either in the terminal or a favourite snack that's served to you on board a plane? I know it's random, but again, leave you on a bit of a fun topic.
I do try to watch what I eat as much as I possibly can, but on those long flights, I always get lured in by those gosh darn Pringles. So that usually ends up being my go-to snack. Now, I'm hopeful that we might have a little bit more tastier products on Northern Pacific, but to date, Pringles ends up being my go-to snack on board an airplane.
Pringles were actually my first snack on my first ever flight. They cost an arm and a leg, but that was also about that big as well. They were my first one as well. But I'll tell you what is dangerous: the snack bars, where you can go up at any point in the flight and grab as many snacks as you want, whether it's Kit Kats, chocolates, crisps. It's like, oh, Jesus, it's not good. But
and we're finalizing, we're going to have the in-flight entertainment capable of a la carte ordering. So you'll just be able to punch buttons right there in your seat and have whatever you want delivered to your seat anytime throughout the flight. I'm very pleased to hear that. For someone I think that's a very genius idea. You're seeing it adopted on trains in the UK, in-seat ordering kind of thing, and having it brought to you. And I think that definitely makes the experience, you're not having to wait and see the cart slowly but surely. And if you want something at any point, you can just order it. So I definitely like that idea. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and have a chat with me. I'm very, very excited to see where Northern Pacific goes, and of course hopefully see that launch in November, and maybe chat to you again or see you again at some point. Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Daniel.
Pleasure. Thank you.